Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to our Octopus Movement podcast, where we meet founding members and find out what they do in this world of non-linear thinkers. And I have with me today Matt Maes. As you can see, he is a visual artist, and he's got some of his art right there behind him and maybe right on his shirt. But what is cool about Matt is that his art is for a purpose and really, really studies. One thing I've noticed about you, Matt, is your propensity to go into the stories of history and the stories of our society in your art. So, Matt, welcome. And Matt is another founding member of the Octopus Movement. So, welcome.
Right on. Thank you so much, Lydia. And so, yeah, blessed to be here. Blessed to meet you. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. Yeah, I've always loved storytelling. I've been an artist since I was about 7 years old, and I've always been just a super curious person, like how things work, how stories work, and weaving that into the art. And it took me a surprisingly long time to figure out how those things are meant to come together for me. But fortunately, I found my way there. And I think when you really find that center in yourself, whatever that is for you, just follow that. Follow the beat of your drum, that thrum in your heart. As I haven't really known any other way, and I think a lot of people in this movement really can relate to that. Is following the beat of your own drum and knowing that is just your way and the correct way for a lot of people as well.
Right. I love this. The curiosity is, I'm not sure how we get along when we let that curiosity go, but it's something we're really born with, right? And thank goodness we have it, because it leads us to where we need to go, or just where's more fun to go. So what was the first time that your curiosity led you to something that was really exciting and really fun?
Oof. Well, I'll tell you, the day I discovered my love for art was when I was 7 years old, and I was very into a lot of different things that 7-year-old boys were into, playing video games, getting into ruckuses, doing things probably shouldn't have been doing, things like that.
Yeah.
But I loved video games. I've always loved, one in particular, Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and which I would say is one of the best, greatest games ever made. And I will that is a hill I will die on, that hill. But so um so yeah, there was this one day where my best friend and I at the time we were playing this game, and then we took a break and we went up to his attic, and I was presented with pencil and paper for the very first time. I'd never drawn anything before. I'd never seen anybody drawing. Well, maybe seen people draw things before, but um, I had the cover of the Mario 64 game in my hand. And so I wanted to emulate all the lines on the cover with Mario and the flying cap, flying away from the castle. And there was just something about that really lit up for me. And I understood, like, wow, I had this sensation of flying. I had this sensation of upliftedness that I've been pursuing in so many different forms ever since. But yeah, that was the day I really discovered that I fell in love with art, and I fell in love with drawing, and filled sketchbook after sketchbook with Mario stuff, I tell you.
Yeah. Yeah. The fact is, people don't realize that we have so much art that creates our world around us, and that so much. And when we have different amounts of pictures in our heads, right? And some people don't see at all. I'm actually one of those people who doesn't actually see pictures in my head unless it's from memory, but yet I can create. I'm 100% a hyper creative. So we create our reality, whether we're telling ourselves stories that are just practical, or we're telling ourselves stories that are wonderful, or we're telling ourselves stories that are horrific. We're creating that reality for ourselves. When we have the artists in the world putting that reality out there for other people to get curious about and see and experience and mill over in their heads, and the same with music, and the same with all the art forms are creating another reality. And you can rabbit hole down there, you can be there, you can expand there. It's unreal, and yet we do that, humans.
Absolutely. That's so beautifully put. And I love the enthusiasm. I have to say, Lydia, I love the energy and the enthusiasm and the curiosity when you're expressing this. And it's so true. You know, all these stories that we have going on in our head. And, you know, it's funny, I've been working on this book illustration project, and it's largely it's autobiographical. I'm working with an author, and you know, she's telling her story, and I'm presenting the illustrations in a mythical fashion. And one of them is around the metote, which is, you know, in Toltec culture. But what they're referring to, the metote, are like all those voices in your head that are, you know, distracting, telling you all these different things, right? But you know, it's like our minds are a labyrinth. You know, our minds, we have all these twists and turns and all these different stories that we're telling ourselves, but like, what's really going on there? Like, what's happening within all the different, you know, beyond the noise, I guess you could say. And that's really what I aim to help people point towards with the art, as well as what's that real true place within ourselves. What is universal, and something that we can really grab onto, and something of substance that when we encounter it, that it lights something up within us. It brings us to life, you know, which I think is something that art should really be able to do, is you find something within, something of yourself within the art, and it brings you to life.
Yeah, our that lighting up and that truth. Tell me about your truth. I think that truth to an individual is what we believe. And
Mm,
unlike what some people may think, that's actually something that we can change. We can change what we believe. When you actually have something that's more, that, as you said, feels beautiful, feels exciting, feels like it is the direction you're going in, as opposed to the truth that was really bringing you down.
mm.
Why wouldn't you step into that? But what do you think about that truth?
You know, I think it is such a journey being in touch with it, and sometimes we lose it, and sometimes we have to regain it. And you know, I tell you a bit about my religious and spiritual journey. Is like, I grew up Christian. I grew up in the church, and like my mom and dad both super Christian, and I oscillated between feeling that connection with that source or universal mind, or what, you know, whatever. There's so many different names for it, right?
Yeah.
Feeling that, and then feeling this sense of illness, this sense of, well, really disease is really the best way to put it. You know, which I can now understand is from the limited structure of church that is attempting to point to that source, or sometimes not, very self-referential in some ways, but in itself is not the thing, right? So I could feel that, and it wasn't just coming from within myself. All these, you know, all these dynamics. I'm like, you know, I'm when I'm pursuing something, I have a tremendous respect for truth. I have a tremendous respect for what reality is, even if myself can't put it into words, and I just acknowledge that it is true, that there is a thing as truth, you know. And so when you pursue when you're earnest about it and when you are in an attitude of discovery and curiosity, and you're like, I want to find out what's really going on, because that's really where I was and where I really have been and what's led me. So there was this one day, I tell you, and I'll never forget. I watched this video on YouTube this past year. He had gone to Egypt and he had taken pictures of all kind of different iconography that they had, like their vignettes, their, all this type of stuff. And so he brought it back and he's like, oh my God, look at this. This is just, they have a Trinity. They have all this stuff just like in the Bible. They have all this stuff just like, and my being able to see that with my own eyes was extremely important, because I'm like, well, I want to know what's really real. And that just revealed something to me. And that also revealed to me that I don't have to stay in the same place where I thought I had to stay in. I did not have to believe what I thought I had to believe. And so you could take one of two paths from that. There's one, it's either all real or it's all crap, which at the time I was just happy to be like, okay, well, done with this mess, So I was very atheistic for a very long time. And it's funny, where I think a lot of Christians can be very hardcore about like converting people, all that type of stuff. I think a lot of atheists are very enthusiastic about deconstructing as well. And I found myself in that camp, to be quite honest. But I remained curious. I wanted to know, okay, well, so if this stuff is not real, then, what is real? I was walking through the desert, so to speak, for quite a long time. Then I encountered people who were speaking about God, who I respected, and people who I could tell were very intelligent, and I could tell weren't like fire and brimstone types, And so I'm like, by the way, one of those sources was The Alchemist. I read The Alchemist, and that book absolutely brought me to tears. oh my God, that one knocked me back big time in the best way. So I read that and I'm like, is it possible that these people know something that I don't know? Are they tuned into something that I'm not tuned into? Right. And so that again cracked open the door a little bit for me. So I'm like, okay, maybe. But I had to have my own experiences that were extraordinary, that I could not explain with my rational mind. And I knew that other people couldn't either. Like there has to be some higher explanation for this. There has to be some higher reasoning for why these things are happening that I couldn't explain, that if you just told them to somebody, then they might think you're crazy, frankly. but in my mind, I'm like, well, I really want to know. I really do, And so I had to go on this whole winding journey. I couldn't just have known all that to start out with, So the journey of truth, the journey of discovering truth, and the journey of finding my truth, you could say, was one of a winding path of like all kinds of twists and turns and this way and that way. It's really the adventure, so going on the adventure and the unfolding of self through the adventure.
We're born with so many tools and all but not the stories. Like the stories are what we get later, but we have so many tools, and to go on that journey right away, we start being curious and we say, I get a response from crying, I get a response from smiling, and and that gets me the place I want to go because I'm curious about that. And pretty soon it's past that. Like within weeks, it's past that and going down the paths that we already want to go. But that
Yes.
path is so important. And what we believe, like I said before, it can change, right? That started that whole conversation. But it's in the change that we learn the different truths for ourselves and what is the ultimate truth. If we don't know what it is that's giving us faith, how are we going to know it if we don't challenge it? If we don't know what's bringing us together? It's all about what energy is connecting us to our world. And
Yes.
you can go this way, you can go that way, but it's the energy that connects us in the world and brings us together in this gigantic sea of tiny little dewdrops. You know? It So how have you, you're using, your illustration for books, and you were talking about that, and I love artists and illustrators um, who do books. I've actually been in a few books as a model for some of these, and, I also went to art school myself. I've got art and music school for my background, so we're kinda two peas in a pod. But I went more strongly into the music, but I love that authors and artists work together to create a reality, whether it's a fanciful reality or whether it's exploring a um, a, a wormhole. You know, what's your favorite wormhole that you've explored that was brought up by somebody else?
Ooh, oh my God. Wow, you drop a question on me like that.
Sorry.
Brought on by someone else. I would have to say, yeah, I would have to say the experience of the mystical, because have I've been like a very long time classically someone who, if I couldn't wrap my head around if it didn't make sense to me, and I thought like, oh, this is fairy nonsense or whatever, then that's stupid, and I would just immediately discard it. Like, but then you have to think to yourself, why is it then that there are so many people who insist on this as a reality? Like, if you think about it, like if you're a witch, or if you're I thought about this one time in my head. It really cracked me up thinking about this. Like, day 1000, you putting sticks and stones and feathers and bird stuff. Has anything happened for you? You know, like you would think after try number 1000 that Mary the Witch would probably give up on magic and be like, okay, why did I try this in the first place? So, but that hasn't happened, right? And there are definitely people who are persistent around things that, frankly, I still look at. I'm like, oh my God, that's just dumb and foolish, flat Earth, whatever nonsense, that type of thing. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot of patience for flat Earth stuff. I'll rip that one up and down. Anyway, but as far as mysticism and magic and tarot and things like that, again, I had to experience it for myself, and I had to, I have actually three. I'm borrowing one from a friend. I haven't used it really, but I have two that I use, and one is I love this one. It's a Salvador Dali tarot deck, which is just as wild and cool as you'd imagine. Oh, it's friggin' awesome. Yeah. And the other one is like a alchemical oracle deck type thing. So I use those ones in conjunction with each other. And what I found is that they're often mirrors for the state of being that I'm in or the direction I'm heading in. Like, I'll pick up a card, and without trying to project a meaning, I always find myself very well. It's really actually stopped being surprising at this point, but how on point it is with where I'm at in my mind and the sage wisdom that comes through. I mean, it's really like a mirror for what's coming through me, and then I can see that, and I can use it for self-reflection. I found that that's really the best use for them is to clarify my mind, because there is an energy connection with them. There's an energetic connection with the cards, what you're doing. And that's really what it's about, is it's like it's not so much about the gemstones and the thing, all that stuff in and of itself as the physical things. It's about the energetic that happens through them, them as a medium, right? So the tarot deck, whatever, I pronounce it both ways, are really that kind of function for me. Is I use them for not even trying to like predict the future or anything like that, but but as a mirror for reflection.
It's our relationship to these things and what we do with them. And when we're alive, which hopefully everybody watching this show is alive in some way, we get curious about these things, and the mystical allows us more of the unknown. There's so many more possibilities in the unknown than in the known. I mean, who are we to know everything, right? We don't know everything. We're gonna completely limit ourselves if we know everything. But having that, presenting ourselves with something that we can, and this is, my argument for the extremely linear, extremely logical thinker, and I'm logical, but I'm not linear. But if you need the logic of it and you need the absolute about it,
Mhm.
there's not anything but possibilities in it for you to actually grow your knowledge and
Mhm.
grow your relationship with yourself. So I love that. The connection to the sage wisdom, which is back to what you were talking about before, the mind and the truth in the mind and the sage wisdom, as opposed to the other voices, which are reactions and safeties. And when we come down, they're not bad. They
Mhm.
bring us down the road, they're great things there. But
Yeah.
the sage wisdom is there being, just chill and giving us exactly what we need in a more responsive but curious way. That's I love this mystical conversation, because mysticism is wisdom.
Big time.
And
It's like, where in fact do we think that it comes from?
yeah,
Because we have knowledge, and knowledge is the things, like, you can collect knowledge in all these different places. You can read books. You can do, you can definitely learn, but wisdom is transcendent and interconnecting at the same time.
yeah.
It's more the how, and it's like knowledge is the what, and wisdom is the how. I think it's the best way, or at least that's one way I like to put it. Is, yeah, wisdom helps you to put knowledge together, really. you know
Right. And to challenge that knowledge and to expand that knowledge and to maybe bring you in another direction that brings you either a parallel truth or a perpendicular truth. That's it's as when we have knowledge, it's finite. When we have wisdom with that knowledge, it's infinite and
mm,
it's expansive. Tell me, on another tangent here, what are the mediums that you use? What are the mediums that you like the most? What do you use the most? Do you use what you like the most? Tell me about the mediums that you use.
oh yeah, definitely. Well, started with my really first love of pencil when I was 7, and so I've been drawing for 28 years now.
Hmm.
And this may surprise you. I've never taken a painting class before. I've never had like an acrylic or oil, whatever, like sat down and someone taught me how to paint. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I learned that myself. But I think when you have an idea of what things look like, like say, this is why I strongly advocate for people doing life drawing and drawing like what's around you, is because what that teaches you is it teaches you to observe forms, what things look like. You know, if you're drawing trees, there's the idea of what your mind will project looks like a tree, but you're like, no, 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 no. And I'm going to sit and I'm going to be curious about what this tree looks like, right? And so observation and recording. I know I'm going off on another tangent here, but starting that way, then when you've drawn enough trees, you can just draw a tree out of your head because you've drawn however many trees, right? So like, okay, I have the idea of what trees look like. Of course, there are many different types of trees, but but there you go. And then you can do that with anything. You can do that with the human form. I'm incredibly curious about anatomy, so I wanted to learn, like, oh my God, there's this beautiful machine that we have, this beautiful vessel that we have. So I learned anatomy. I drew people's facial expressions. I drew men and women. I drew I used reference for all these things. And by the way, professional artists actually do use reference quite a bit, more than you might think, Anyway, so pencil, paintbrush, acrylic. I'm soon going to be breaking into using oils. I'm very excited about that. Translucent oils. I also have an airbrush. That thing is wicked cool. I love the airbrush for highlights, for shading. It is just, wow. The superb. And Micron ink pens as well. I'm huge on the ink pens. I love those.
They're an extension of the pencil. To me, they're an extension of the pencil. It's just so intuitive to someone who's a pencil drawer.
Oh yeah. Well, and it's a good challenge too, because you can't really erase ink, right? You can erase pencil mark, but if you can really dive into it with ink, I think that will really strengthen you as an artist as well. Learning to make definite lines that you can't erase. So on the similar. Okay. Oh, mechanical pencils as well. Love those. And paint pens. I've really gotten into paint pens recently. I mean, if you are creating a painting and you want to create some very fine lines, some very definite lines, being able to draw with paint, I love that. Especially for someone like myself who leans on a more graphical style sometimes. Like I like to give things sort of a graphic novel type feel, and with the realism as well. I would say that that's pretty characteristic of my style.
Wow. Yeah. We kind of sound like two peas in a pod, but I love to draw, and I actually love ink. For the same reason, I love ink. I love that, there's nothing wrong. There's never anything wrong. What you have there, you're going to work with it, because that is kind of like, it's a lot like life. It works really nicely, but we're getting down to the time that we need to stop the podcast, which is very sad. But I want to point out to everybody that you can connect with Matt. His email is on the screen, and you can also connect to Matt and other Octopus members, Octopus founders, through the octopusmovement.org. Matt, if you were to tell the audience one thing to do to make their day better today, what would you tell them?
I would say follow your curiosity and find the things that make you come alive. Absolutely. This is something I've been very enthusiastic about, is like, find what makes you go, fuck yeah. Seriously. Because there is a power in that. It's an explosive joy, and it's underrated. You know, when you find the things, like for myself, I love guitar, I love art, I love that sense of aliveness. And when I find that, everything else comes together. You know, you'll apply your mind, you'll apply your action, you will love it. It will do the best things for you. So find what makes you go fuck yeah and go after it.
Right on. Thank you so much for being on the show and talking to me, Matt. And may you have an amazing day. May you all have an amazing day. Thank you for being on the Octopus Movement podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.